We all know the story. In the Garden of Eden, the serpent deceived Eve, and for its crime, God cursed it to crawl on its belly and eat dust for the rest of its days. We have read this verse in Genesis our entire lives. But have you ever stopped to ask, does that punishment truly fit a crime that condemned all of humanity and changed the course of eternity? A simple change in locomotion seems almost trivial for an act of cosmic treason. What if that curse, the one we all know, was merely the visible echo of a much greater judgment? A spiritual sentence so profound, so terrifying, that it was deliberately erased from common teaching. Before it was a creature of the dust, ancient texts suggest the serpent was something else entirely, a luminous, celestial being of immense power. The true curse wasn't just the loss of its legs, but the stripping of its original glory, binding it spiritually to the very world it had corrupted. This raises a chilling question. If such a monumental truth exists, why was it hidden? Why would the full story be removed from our understanding? The answer is as unsettling as the secret itself. Early councils feared this revelation would shift mankind's focus from our own redemption to the ongoing war with a fallen prince imprisoned among us. They believed the truth was simply too much to bear. If you have ever felt that there were deeper secrets sealed within the pages of the Bible, you are not alone. What you are about to discover is a truth that has been waiting in the shadows for centuries. Join us on this journey to uncover what was lost. Like this video and subscribe, because the full story of the serpent's curse is not about an end, but the beginning of a terrestrial reign that continues to this day. The story we are told in Genesis is a story of consequence. But look closer, read the words carefully. God curses the ground for Adam's sake. He pronounces sorrow upon Eve. Yet for the serpent, the architect of this tragedy, the punishment is to crawl and eat dust. Is that the full measure of justice for a crime that fractured creation? The silence in the text is deafening. There is a piece missing from this divine judgment, a verse that feels deliberately removed. The clues to what was erased are not in Genesis. They are hidden deep within the prophetic books, like a key left for those who know where to look. Turn to the book of Ezekiel, chapter 28. The prophet delivers a lament for a fallen king, but the language he uses describes something far older, far more powerful. He speaks of a guardian cherub, perfect in beauty, who was once in Eden, the garden of God. This being was adorned with every precious stone, and walked in the midst of the stones of fire. Who is this magnificent creature from Ezekiel's vision? A being of light and fire, present in Eden itself. The scriptures never mention another being of this stature in the garden. Could it be that Ezekiel is not describing a human king at all, but revealing the serpent's original, breathtaking form? The form it possessed before the fall. This suggests the account in Genesis was not the whole story, but a summary meant for a world not yet ready for the terrifying truth. If this is true, then everything we thought we knew about the curse is wrong. The loss of limbs was not the punishment. It was merely the outward sign of a far greater spiritual sentence. A luminous prince of the heavens was not just humbled. He was fundamentally changed, bound to the very dust he was commanded to eat. The real curse was not a change in his body, but the imprisonment of his spirit within the physical world he had just helped to corrupt. Why was this truth concealed? And what does it mean for us, living on a world that serves as a prison for a fallen celestial power? The gap between Genesis and Ezekiel is not an accident. It is a breadcrumb trail, leading us to truths that were once common knowledge but were later deemed too dangerous to teach. For a fuller picture, we must look to the ancient texts that surrounded the Old Testament, writings that the early patriarchs knew well. The Book of Jubilees, an ancient Jewish work, speaks directly of this. It describes the serpent not as a simple beast, but as an intelligent creature that once walked upright and spoke. This wasn't just a fringe idea. Ancient rabbinic commentaries, known as the Midrash, expand on this forgotten history. They paint a picture of a magnificent being, a prince among God's creatures, whose physical form was as glorious as its intellect was sharp. These traditions tell us that when the curse was pronounced, the serpent lost its legs, yes, but it also lost its voice, its status, and its heavenly radiance. It was a complete and total demotion, a spiritual exile. Suddenly, Ezekiel's vision of a guardian cherub in Eden makes perfect, chilling sense. He wasn't seeing a different story. He was seeing the part of the story that was deliberately cut. You have to ask yourself, why would this be hidden? The early church fathers, in councils like Nicaea, made difficult decisions. They sought to simplify the faith, to focus humanity on the singular path to salvation through Christ. A story about a celestial prince imprisoned on earth, a cosmic war raging in the shadows. This was a truth they feared would distract, or worse, terrify the faithful. So they sealed it, not by destroying the texts, but by setting them aside. They left the core truth in Genesis, the fall, the sin, the consequence, but they removed the terrifying context of who the serpent truly was. They left us the story of a fallen animal, but hid the story of a fallen angel trapped in a prison of flesh and dust. What they didn't realize is that by hiding the enemy's identity, they also hid the true scale of our spiritual battle. So, what was this world like before the garden? Before the 6 days of creation we know? The Bible begins with the earth being without form and void. But ancient wisdom asks a critical question. Did God create chaos, or did chaos result from a war that preceded man? Before Adam ever took his first breath, there was a different order. A world ruled by celestial princes, with this magnificent cherub, this future serpent, holding a place of immense honor. This was not a world of flesh and blood, but of light and sound, a symphony of creation that we can no longer hear. This primordial harmony was shattered by the first and greatest rebellion. The war that the book of Revelation describes as happening in heaven had its echo in the material realm. It was a spiritual cataclysm that left the early earth scarred and broken, plunging it into the darkness and watery chaos described in Genesis chapter 1, verse 2. The creation of man, then, was not God's first act, but his act of reclamation. He was restoring a kingdom that had been ruined by treason, planting a garden in the heart of a conquered territory. This is the secret that changes everything. Adam and Eve were not placed in a neutral paradise. They were placed in the epicenter of a fallen monarch's former domain. The serpent was not a random beast that wandered into the garden. He was the deposed king, spiritually chained to his own ruined kingdom, watching as new inheritors were given the dominion he had lost. His temptation of Eve was not a simple act of malice. It was a calculated act of war, a desperate attempt by an imprisoned sovereign to corrupt the new heirs and reclaim his territory through them. By removing this context, the story of the fall becomes a simple tale of human disobedience. But when you restore the forgotten prelude, it becomes a chapter in a cosmic war. The curse to crawl on the ground was not just a humiliation. It was the final lock on a spiritual prison. It bound a celestial power to the earth, forcing him to reign from the dust instead of a throne of light. And it means we are not just living in a fallen world. We are living on the very ground that serves as a prison for the greatest enemy of God. This raises an unavoidable conflict with centuries of tradition. The story we've always been taught is one of simple temptation, a clever beast, a forbidden fruit, and a fall from grace. It is a powerful lesson in obedience, contained neatly within the walls of the garden. But the story revealed in these ancient texts is not a simple lesson. It is the history of a cosmic war, a divine judgment, and a celestial monarch imprisoned under our very feet. The two versions cannot easily coexist. One is a story about mankind's failure. The other is about a war that began long before mankind existed. So why was this profound truth hidden? Why would the early church fathers, the very men who compiled the books of our Bible, choose to present the simpler, safer version? The answer is not a conspiracy, but a calculated act of protection. In the early centuries of the faith, as the gospel spread, the message needed to be clear, direct, and centered on one thing: salvation through Jesus Christ. The story of a fallen cherub, of a pre-Adamic world, and of an ongoing spiritual war on a prison planet was deemed too complex, too terrifying. They feared it would create doubt, not faith. In councils that shaped the canon of Scripture, decisions were made. Texts like the Book of Jubilees or the Book of Enoch, which spoke openly of these events, were set aside. They were not necessarily declared false, but they were considered too deep, too mysterious for the average believer. The leaders of the church chose to build a foundation on the clearest revelations of God. They sealed away the deeper histories, believing they were protecting the flock from truths they were not ready to bear. They gave us the map to salvation but hid the map of the war. By doing this, however, they inadvertently concealed the true nature of our enemy. They reduced a deposed king to a mere serpent, a cosmic traitor to a simple tempter. Their intention may have been to protect our faith, but the consequence was that we lost the context for our spiritual battle. They wanted us to focus on our own redemption, but in doing so, they hid the identity of the very prisoner whose defeat was central to that redemption. The question we must now face is, what else did they hide to protect us? This revelation doesn't diminish God's plan for salvation, it magnifies it. Suddenly, the cross is not just a remedy for human sin, but a declaration of war, a reclaiming of territory from a celestial usurper. The story of the Bible is no longer a simple drama confined to humanity, but the history of God's patient, strategic, and unstoppable plan to restore a kingdom that fell long before Adam. Our own redemption is a critical part of that cosmic victory. We are not just saved souls, we are enlisted soldiers in the reclamation of a world held captive. Perhaps the early church fathers were right for their time. Perhaps the world did need a simpler story to grasp the hope of the gospel, but you are not living in their time. The very fact that you are seeking these answers, that this forgotten history resonates within your spirit, suggests that you are ready for the truth they sealed away. This is not knowledge for the faint of heart. It is for those who have always suspected there was more to the story, for those whose faith is strong enough to look beyond the veil and see the battle for what it truly is. Is it any wonder that so much of modern faith can feel shallow or powerless? We have been fighting a war without knowing the identity of our true enemy or the nature of the battlefield. A faith that has been sanitized of its cosmic context becomes a set of moral guidelines, not a spiritual reality. When we forget that we live on a prison planet, a contested territory, under the influence of a fallen prince, we lose the urgency and the power that defined the early church. They knew they were living behind enemy lines. We have forgotten. Understanding this hidden history is the key to unlocking a deeper, more resilient faith. It reframes our struggles not as random misfortunes, but as skirmishes on a spiritual front line. It transforms our prayers from simple requests into strategic acts of spiritual warfare. The comfortable story we were told was meant to keep us safe. But the true story, the one that was hidden in plain sight, is the one that will set us free and equip us for the victory that is already won. But this revelation forces us to look even further back, not just before Adam, but before the 6 days of creation as we know them. The Bible says the earth was without form and void, and darkness was on the face of the deep. Have you ever asked why? Was this God's starting point, or was it the wreckage of something that came before? The very existence of a fallen celestial prince implies a history that predates our own. Ancient Jewish thought, particularly in mystical traditions, speaks of worlds created and destroyed before ours. They hint at a primordial creation of pure light, a spiritual realm that was the original dominion of these great angelic beings. This was not a world of matter, but of divine energy. The guardian cherub from Ezekiel's vision did not walk in a garden of trees, but in the midst of the stones of fire. This was his kingdom, a reality of light that was shattered by his rebellion. This leads to a profound and unsettling question. If our world was built upon the ruins of a previous, shattered creation, what remnants of that original world still exist? When God said, "Let there be light," was He creating something new? Or was He restoring a fragment of a divine light that had been lost in the darkness? Could it be that Eden was not the first garden, but a second one? A holy sanctuary planted in the heart of a fallen cosmic battlefield? The story of the serpent's curse, then, is not the beginning of the mystery. It is merely a doorway. By understanding who the serpent was, we are led to ask what he lost. And what he lost was more than just his status. He lost a kingdom of light whose existence has been almost completely forgotten, and whose secrets may still be hidden, buried deep beneath the foundations of our own world. This transforms our understanding of God Himself. He is not just a creator, but a restorer. The story of Genesis is not the account of a new beginning from nothing, but the story of a divine reclamation. God steps into a realm ruined by rebellion and begins to patiently, powerfully bring forth order from chaos, light from darkness. Every creative act in those 6 days was a direct countermove against the desolation left behind by a fallen prince. The Garden of Eden was not just a paradise. It was the beachhead of God's kingdom, established in the heart of a captured land. And what, then, was the purpose of mankind? We were not an afterthought. We were the answer. Adam was created and placed in that garden as God's appointed heir, the new ruler of a domain that had been forfeited by treason. Humanity was God's living declaration that this world would not be abandoned to the darkness. We were created to be stewards of a restored kingdom, the very image of God in a place that had been marred by the image of His enemy. This is why the serpent's attack was so immediate, so personal. Our very existence was an act of war against his claim. This knowledge does not destroy faith, it anchors it. It takes the story you have always known and places it on a foundation of cosmic history. The coming of Christ is no longer just a plan to save man from his sin, but the ultimate invasion of a loving king to reclaim his territory and liberate his people from the rule of a shadow monarch. The cross becomes the central flag planted in enemy territory, declaring that the war is won and the rightful king has returned. This truth doesn't diminish the gospel, it magnifies it to its true breathtaking scale. You were always told that you are part of a grand story. Now you can see how grand it truly is. Your faith is not a simple belief system. It is an enlistment in the greatest restoration project in history. The truths that were sealed away were not meant to be lost forever. They were waiting for a generation with faith strong enough to bear them, a generation ready to understand that our God is not just the God of a garden, but the God of the entire cosmos, who is making all things new. This brings us to the final, most profound secret, the one that underpins all the others. If God knew about the cherub's rebellion, if He knew a war would scar His creation, and if He knew man would fall, then the story we've uncovered is not one of tragedy and repair. It is the story of a plan set in motion before the first star was ever hung in the heavens. The redemption of mankind was not a reaction to the serpent's treachery in the garden. It was the reason the garden was planted in the first place. Look to the final book of the Bible, to Revelation. It speaks of the Lamb who was slain from the foundation of the world. Think about what that truly means. Before Genesis chapter 1 verse 1, before the earth was formless and void, the solution was already in place. Christ was not plan B. The cross was not a desperate measure. It was the eternal anchor of a history that had not yet unfolded. The war in heaven, the fall of the serpent, and the creation of Adam were all permitted to happen within the shadow of a victory that was already guaranteed. This changes how we must read Genesis forever. The promise in the garden that the seed of the woman would crush the serpent's head was not the beginning of a new plan. It was the first time that eternal plan was spoken into time and history. It was the opening move in the visible realm of a war that had already been won in the spiritual one. God placed mankind on a conquered battlefield, not to see if we would win, but to show the imprisoned prince how he had already lost. Therefore, the truth that was hidden from us was not just the identity of our enemy, but the eternal security of our victory. The early church councils may have sealed this history to protect a young faith, but now it is revealed to strengthen a mature one. Your salvation is not an afterthought. It is the fulfillment of a divine promise that is older than creation itself. You are not a victim of a fallen world. You are a child of the King, placed here to bear witness to a restoration that was written in eternity before the world began. Take a moment and let this settle in your spirit. The story of your life is not a small one. It is a single, vital thread in a tapestry that stretches back before time began. The struggles you face are not random. They are echoes of an ancient war. And your faith is not just a personal belief. It is your allegiance to the one true King in a world still under the shadow of a fallen prince. This knowledge was never meant to frighten you. It was meant to empower you. For centuries, these truths lay dormant, sealed away in forgotten texts and whispered traditions. They were hidden by men who, with good intentions, believed we were not ready. But God's truth cannot be contained forever. We are living in a time of revelation, a time when the seals are being broken, and what was hidden is being shouted from the rooftops for all who have ears to hear. You are part of this great awakening. If this truth burns in your heart, leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the bell so you do not miss the revelations that are still to come. And now we have a members area. By becoming a member, you bless this work and help us continue producing edifying and revealing content like this, bringing more light into the darkness. We are a community of seekers from all over the world, united by these profound truths. Let us know you are with us. In the comments below, tell us the city you are watching from. Until next time, walk in the light of the victory that was secured from the foundation of the world.